What is going on, all of you amazing gamers out there in the world? I'm Mega Answer. Thank you for watching this YouTube video, whether you are a new or returning viewer. I appreciate your support. Thanks for stopping by. And today, just hopefully a quick little video, just going over a topic that I've been thinking about lately. Just like overall, is a video game considered a work of art? It is a very contentious topic. I feel like I've seen some people say yes, some people say no, some people who say it depends on the game. I actually ran a poll on the community tab here a couple weeks ago as of this recording, kind of asking, what people thought. And so 8 votes here, half the people said yes. And then between that, a quarter of people said no, and a quarter of the people said depends on the game, which I can see. Where would I put myself? I would say video games to me, no matter how they look, are generally art, right? Especially when you break it down into pieces, right? You have the art, it's like the visuals itself, you have the music, you have the audio, you have the narrative, you have the programming. The programming would be the one part where I don't know if I'd consider that art. Anyways, I decided to look up the official definition according to Google, so take it with a grain of salt. Art, this is from the Oxford Languages apparently, is defined as the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, which is very interesting because I think, and this is for a separate video, I actually made a separate video talking about this months ago. How does this apply to AI generated art, right? Is that not art? I don't know. Anyways, did they change the definition based on AI here to specify human creative skills, or are they going to have to change it later to account for AI? We will see. Essentially, expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form, such as a painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Now, you could argue that games aren't primarily produced for beauty or emotional power, but honestly, I would kind of disagree with that. Like, sure, the primary, I don't want to take too much into the definition here. The primary purpose of video games, right? To be honest, for these companies is money. But the primary reason for us to play games is to have some kind of, immersive emotional experience, right? What separates a video game from something like a movie, a TV show, a painting or a sculpture, a book, music, is the fact that it is an amalgamation of all these different sorts of pieces to create this interactive experience that we can then emotionally connect to. That's ultimately what playing games is about, to have some investment into. And I would argue that it goes along this category. So like, I have a list here of some games that for sure, like if you think, oh, what video games should be considered art, like these are some of the obvious ones. These are some of the ones that come to mind immediately. But then some others that maybe not so much. But yeah, I would argue this applies. So just a little bit of a kind of like personal experience here. When I was in college, one of my majors was in interactive media and game development. And for that program, we had kind of 2 different tracks. We had an art track and a programming track. Now, as a software engineer, I took the programming track. It was a fun way for me to kind of flex my computer's programming skills, right? But the art track included visuals, of course, like using like Blender and Maya to do like 3D modeling, and also like sprite work, of course. But also like music and audio in games was a big factor. Narrative, I feel like you could argue whether a book is art or not. That one I could see maybe more so. I don't know. But then again, emotional power you could definitely get from books. You create an emotional connection with a book, so I could see that too. But like, the programming is the one part maybe not as much art as some of the other aspects. Like, of course, like the visuals and the music are going to be considered art, right? But games are an amalgamation of all of those factors. So I think it's important to appreciate all games as art. I would honestly say someone could list off a random game and say, yeah, that's art. So here are a few examples of just some maybe obvious ones and then some not so obvious ones. But like, let's start with the obvious, one of the obvious ones. Okami. If you don't say this game is art, I don't know what you're talking about. This game is absolutely beautiful. Like, in a visual sense, this is clearly art. In the visual sense, like the brushstroke style, this game looks beautiful. I still want to play this game. It is high up on my backlog in terms of games to play because it just absolutely visually striking. I've heard the music is really, really like kind of serene and immersive into this world this almost feudal Japan world that they've created with the art style here, which is really, really cool. So obvious example of a game being art. I mean, just look at it. Like in motion, when people think of video games as art, the main thing they think of right away are the visuals, right? Are the visuals striking? Are they unique? Do they have a unique art style to them? And this is one for sure that is up there. Another one, just a shout out an indie one that I've seen before is Chicory: A Colorful Tale. This is on my list of games to play. I have not played them, but I mean, once again, you look at this game, like it is clear as day. It is very artistic in terms of its art style here. Just like how colorful, like literally colorful being in the title, just like very visually striking. I really do want to play this game at some point. It looks really, really fun. And visually very creative. So definitely another one where art's actually the theme. You know, these last two have been kind of like art as the theme, and like for sure those games are artistic. Same thing with like an Epic Mickey Rebrushed, right? I'm thinking of that. There's another example later on that I'll get to. But definitely, I mean, this is another one where I'm like, if you can't call this art, I don't know what you're calling it these days. Maybe a little less so with this one, but just the art style is very unique to this game. I gotta shout out Jet Set Radio when I can. Very artistic game. I mean, just like the vibes. I would argue the visuals and the music especially for this one, just like the overall style of the game is very artistic and different kind of art style, right? More rough around the edges, graffiti art being like a very primary focus of this game, which is really cool. It's very unique in that sense. So I think like a lot of games when it comes down to their art style, like a lot of them can stand out in unique ways, and those are the ones we tend to remember more and think more of as being very artistic. Like Wind Waker, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is another great example I can think of that. Like one of those obvious, like, what's a game with a unique sense of art, right? In terms of the visual style. So definitely an example of that here. Another obvious one here, being Kirby and the Rainbow Curse. Now, I've also not played this one, but I mean, definitely a different type of art style, but very much so like that claymation, kind of in the same vein as something like a Kirby's Epic Yarn or Yoshi's Woolly World or Crafted World, where their art styles are literally like other forms of typical physical real world art put into a gameplay style. So very much so, like again, another obvious one. Oh, I love how they did the claymation gamepad here. I never even realized this with this trailer. Very unique sense of art style here. So like these games are obvious examples of ones that very much so, like I think most people would say these are good examples of video games being art, mainly based on their visual style, but in some cases like Jet Set Radio also like, you know, thematically with music and audio and everything too. But definitely some obvious examples here. This one's interesting because I bet you if you asked a lot of people like when they would think of video games as art, I don't think the generation of PlayStation 1 and 64, I forget what generation number that is, let me know in the comments below. I don't think most people would say these off the bat. You know, very early 3D, like polygonal days, but I mean, just look at the environment in this game. Look at the environmental details there. The music is fantastic, just the experience, right? Like the definition of art was that we looked up, it's the emotional impact of these games. This game in particular, Final Fantasy VII, has had a huge, probably one of the biggest emotional impacts on gamers throughout the history of games. It is up there for sure. There's a reason why they're remaking it into 3 parts, right? Just very, very heavy emotions that gamers can connect to and feel when experiencing these games. This game in particular, and of course the remakes coming out. So, like I said, maybe not in terms of the visual sense, maybe as much. Would you consider this art? I mean, it's very blocky, very kind of like early 3D polygonal look, but still, for sure, art I would consider. Super Nintendo. We got to get into some Super Nintendo here. Man, Super Nintendo has some great pixel art. I wish companies would make more pixel art games. Indies are definitely sticking with it, which I appreciate, but I mean, they look beautiful even to this day. The Super Nintendo, in my opinion, is one of the best aged consoles to this day, along with the Game Boy Advance, which is kind of like a portable version, slightly lesser in terms of visual fidelity. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's better, but it looks a little lesser just because it's a portable system, right? The focus portability there, but still, same kind of vein. Pixel art on these systems is beautiful, right? Super Metroid is probably the highlight in my opinion. Let me know in the comments below your highlights for like pixel art on the Super Nintendo, because for me it's Super Metroid. I mean, but not only with the visuals, but also the atmosphere it creates, right? In that way, it's almost an artistic sense in the same way as like movies or shows, where not only is it the visual style, but it's like the atmosphere, the immersion of said medium, whether it's movies or video games or whatever, right? For sure, Metroid, especially like Super Metroid, just captures that in spades. You know, genuinely looks really, really good even to this day, but also just immerses you with the audio design especially, and the music you get in this game, although the audio seems to be more of a factor in Metroid games to create that sense of immersion. You know, so definitely one that I would still consider art, although maybe some others wouldn't. Now we're getting into the really crazy stuff. I don't know how much gameplay's in this trailer, but shout out to Tempest 2000 in particular with this, right? Old vector graphics, old games from this era. Okay, so you get some. These I would consider art. Very primitive graphics, of course, back during this time, but like genuinely, I would still consider these art, right? In their own sense. Very limited in terms of art style for sure, but the combination of the sounds and the music and just everything going on and the experience you get, really art, in my opinion, is like the experience you get from this, right? If you feel something from interacting with some sort of medium, that's art, right? That is art. At least to me. Let me know if you disagree with that in the comments below. But even something like Tempest, or those old arcade games, old Atari games, E.T. E.T. on the Atari, that's art. I'm sorry. I know no one wants to hear that. That's art. But also, I just found it interesting to pull up this really old commercial for this. Got a couple more modern examples here. Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, shout out. People think I hate this DLC. I don't. It just should not be nominated for Game of the Year because it's DLC. But in terms of like art style, I don't think anyone's going to argue against this either. Even though this is kind of a more realistic, quote-unquote, looking game, I would put it in the same vein as like a Black Myth Wukong, where it's like, not necessarily like the world is more realistic, but like the visual fidelity is obviously a lot higher. Not like cartoony, like even some more modern games, like for example, Hi-Fi Rush, which you're listening to now, right? That goes for a more cartoony aesthetic. This goes for a more realistic fidelity here. But just like the sense of art style is off the charts with the world of Elden Ring and a lot of the other FromSoft games, right? So to me, this is also one that I don't know if you can argue against being art. Kind of more of a proponent for visual fidelity in terms of art style rather than maybe some of the other components of art. But people still got amazing experiences from this game. They felt something just struggling through the bosses of this and other FromSoft games, and just like, I don't think, oh, that's gross looking. I don't think you can argue against this being art either. The one example that people are going to argue with me the most about is this final one here, which is what I wanted to end on. Call of Duty. I don't really like talking about Call of Duty. I don't really play the games. I don't resonate with them. But I wanted to bring up this trailer for Black Ops 6 to mention that this is also art, right? Because to me, Black Ops is like one of the definition of realistic visual fidelity looking games, right? I mean, they're literally showing clips from actual historical footage of like Bill Clinton's presidency in the US and stuff like that, like actual clips. Is this considered art? Yes, I would still say so. At least I think it should be considered art, even if it's a realistic game. Just because something is realistic, it can't be art, right? Realism is a genre of like paintings in art and sculptures. At least I imagine sculptures. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. I'm not a huge art buff, but paintings for sure. Like realism is a separate style, just like we can have different styles of art, like art styles, cartoony, comic book like realism. Like in this case, this is still art, even if it's, you know, imitating reality. It's still not quite reality. Therefore, it is still an art style. And I would say this game is still art in its own right. Just really what I'm trying to hammer down to as I wrap up this video is, to me, all games are art. Because to me, games are a combination of other mediums that are already considered art, like visuals, 3D modeling or 2D, like sprite work or whatever it is, music and audio, narrative, like writing narratives. The programming, maybe not as much, that's more the technical aspect of it, right? But it's a combination of other pieces that are art, creating an experience that is more about emotional impact and immersion, which is also what art typically is, right? If you're going to consider movies art, TV shows art, music art, gaming should be there as well. That's all I'm saying. So I understand why people may not say certain games aren't art, or like just games aren't art in general. Like, that's fair. I mean, I think the interactive part of it makes it tricky. Like, can art be interactive? But personally, I think they can be. And I think video games are kind of the defining example of interactive art, where you are experiencing and having emotional impacts and connections with these games, right? So just wanted to make this fun little video to see what you all think. But that's going to do it for here. Before I make this too long, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with me that all video games are art? Do you only think that certain games are art? Do you not think any games are art? Because clearly, based on that poll I had, there's a widespread of opinions out there. I would love to hear yours in the comments below. Otherwise, I will catch you all on the next video or live stream. And until then, keep on gaming, keep on enjoying art.